Hello and welcome to Foreign Dispatches, the program that takes you around the world. I'm Layo Olarinde. On the program this week, the first war crimes trial in Ukraine ends with a life sentencing of 21-year-old Russian soldier Vadim Shishimarin, who murdered a 62-year-old civilian. U.S. President Joe Biden's visit to Asia to reaffirm the U.S. commitment to two key alliances, South Korea and Japan, while also seeking ways to further expand cooperation. One of the main stories out of Ukraine since the invasion began is the verdict pronounced on a young Russian soldier that was sentenced to life in prison for killing an unarmed civilian. Vadim Shishimarin is 21-year-old and has become the first Russian sentenced at the first war crimes trial arising from the February 24 invasion.
A court in Ukraine has jailed a Russian tank commander for life for killing a civilian at the first war crimes trial since the invasion.
Given the circumstances, the court's verdict is Vadim Shishimarin, born on October 17, 2000, is found guilty in committing a crime according to the second sentence 438 of the Ukrainian Criminal Codex. He is assigned a life sentence.
The captured soldier, Sergeant Vadim Shishimarin, was convicted of killing Alexander Shelepov, a 62-year-old, in the northeastern village of Chupahivka on 28th of February. He admitted shooting Mr. Shelepov, but said he had been acting on orders and asked for forgiveness of his widow. Multiple other alleged war crimes are being investigated by Ukraine. President Volodymyr Zelensky addressed the World Economic Forum, telling the Davos meeting that the world faces a turning point and had to ratchet up sanctions against Russia as a warning to other countries considering using brute force. His speech kicked off in earnest the four-day World Economic Forum that gathers some 2,000 businesses and economic leaders, as well as experts. With Ukraine this year topping the agenda, he also used the opportunity to ask for more funds to rebuild Ukraine.
Ukraine needs all the weapons it has been asking for, not only the ones we are getting. That's also why Ukraine needs finances. The minimum is $5 billion every month. We need funds to rebuild Ukraine. That's why United 24, the Fund for Ukraine Renewal, has been created. We appeal for your support by joining this platform, a platform of the Ukrainian state.
We could talk about all day long.
In the meantime, the United Nations Food Chief says failure to open up the port is a declaration of war on global food security. He was speaking during a session at the World Economic Forum.
Failure to open up the ports is a declaration of war on global food security. If we can get the ports open, it doesn't solve the problem, but it begins to create stability of a volatile food market right now, combined with all these other issues that we're facing, which we could talk about all day long. Before Ukraine, I was already out there with a clarion call that we've got a world food crisis and we're facing the worst humanitarian crisis since World War II. Just when you think it couldn't get any worse over a year ago, you had Ethiopia, then you had Afghanistan, and then the breadbasket of the world. This now got the longest bread lines of the world. And so now, because of this crisis, we're taking food from the hungry to give to the starving. It's absolutely a crisis mode.
Despite sanctions and embargoes placed on Russia, President Vladimir Putin says transitioning to ruble payments for foreign firms buying Russian exports will strengthen Russia's currency. Speaking at a televised meeting with Belarusian President Alexander Lukashenko, Mr. Putin also said that measures the Russian government had taken to support the economy were having a positive effect. The Kremlin has also accused the West of triggering a global food crisis by imposing the severest sanctions in modern history on Russia over the war in Ukraine. The conflict in Ukraine and the West's attempt to isolate Russia as punishment have sent the price of grain, cooking oil, fertilizer and energy soaring. UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres said last week that he was in urgent contact with Russia, Ukraine, Turkey, and the United States and the European Union in an effort to restore grain exports from Ukraine as a global food crisis worsens.
U.S. President Joe Biden has visited Asia for the first time in his presidency. It's a high-profile trip meant to bolster ties with regional allies and also launch a new trade initiative. Or during the 4-day-long tour, Mr. Biden tried to reinforce partnerships with South Korea and Japan, as well as reaffirm the region's long-standing importance to U.S. foreign policy, especially with regards to China.
U.S. President Joe Biden's first leg of his Asia trip began in South Korea. He arrived on Friday and was greeted at the Osun Air Base in Pyeongtaek by South Korean Foreign Minister Park Jin and the Commanding General of U.S. forces in Korea, Paul LaCamera, among other American and South Korean officials. Mr. Biden and his new South Korean counterpart, Yoon Suk-yeol, met in Seoul in their first diplomatic engagement since the latter's inauguration. Biden and Yoon said their country's decades-old alliance needed to develop not only to face North Korean threats, but to keep the Indo-Pacific region free and open and protect global supply chains. The friendly encounter between allies is clouded by intelligence showing North Korean leader Kim Jong-un is prepared to conduct nuclear or missile tests. Before departing for Japan, President Biden visited the U.S. military base in Pyeongtaek. Biden was seen eating ice cream, taking a selfie with a U.S. soldier, and interacting with people at a bowling alley at the Osun Air Base, where thousands of U.S. and South Korean military officers are deployed. Earlier that day, Mr. Biden also toured the Korean Airspace Operations Center with South Korean President Yoon Suk-yeol, where U.S. and South Korean troops are tasked with defending any missiles the North might launch. Upon arriving in Japan, the second leg of his trip, Mr. Biden said the United States would be willing to use force to defend Taiwan, in a comment that appears to be a departure from existing U.S. policy on the self-ruled island. Mr. Biden warned China is flirting with danger over Taiwan and vowed to intervene militarily to protect the island if it is attacked.
They're already flirting with danger right now by flying so close and all the maneuvers that are undertaken. But the United States is committed. We've made a commitment. We support the one China policy. We support all that we've done in the past. But that does not mean that China has the ability, the jurisdiction to go in and use force to take over Taiwan. So we stand firmly with Japan and with other nations not to let that happen. And my expectation is it will not happen. It will not be attempted. And my expectation is a lot of it depends upon just how strongly the world makes clear that that kind of action is going to result in long-term disapprobation by the rest of the community.
Speaking in Japan, he appeared to contradict long-standing U.S. policy in the region, although the White House insisted there had been no departure. Mr. Biden drew a parallel between Taiwan and Russia's invasion of Ukraine, prompting an angry rebuke from Beijing. When asked by a reporter if the U.S. will defend Taiwan if it were attacked, Biden's answer was straight to the point.
That's the commitment we made. That's the commitment we made. We are not, look, here's the situation. We agree with a one China policy. We signed on to it and all the attendant agreements made from there. But the idea that it can be taken by force, just taken by force, is just not appropriate. It will dislocate the entire region and be another action similar to what happened in Ukraine.
Biden adds that it is his expectation that such an event would not happen or be attempted. He was on his first tour of Asia as U.S. president, visiting regional allies. The U.S. currently maintains policy of a so-called strategic ambiguity on whether it would intervene militarily to protect Taiwan in event of a Chinese attack. China considers the democratic island as part of its territory under its one China policy. It says it is the most sensitive and important issue in its ties with Washington. Following Biden's comments, China's Foreign Ministry spokesman Wang Wenbin said China deplored and rejected the U.S. remarks and added that issues surrounding Taiwan were purely part of China's internal affairs and that they would not stand for any foreign interference.
The Chinese side expresses strong dissatisfaction with and resolute opposition to the relevant words of the U.S. side. We urge the U.S. side to abide by the One China principle and the provisions of the 3 China-U.S. joint communiques, honor its important commitment of not supporting Taiwan independence, exercise prudence in words and deeds over Taiwan's question, and refrain from sending any wrong signal to the Taiwan independent forces, so as to avoid seriously damaging the situation across the Taiwan Strait and the China-U.S. relations. China will take resolute actions to safeguard its sovereignty and security interests. We always deliver what we promise.
Still during the trip, U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken met Japanese Foreign Minister Yoshimasa Hayashi for talks in Tokyo. The meeting between Blinken and Hayashi held on the sidelines of a bilateral meeting between Biden and the Japanese Prime Minister Fumio Kishida, affirming the alliance between the two nations.
Our two leaders had, I think, a very, very substantive and extremely productive discussion that went on for some time, covering a broad range of issues, which I think is further evidence of the fact that our alliance between Japan and the United States is stronger than it's ever been, and more important in many ways.
And notwithstanding ongoing Russia's aggression against Ukraine, the summit meeting, Japan and the U.S. were able to, number one, share the strategic importance of Indo-Pacific region, and number two, renew our commitment to peace and prosperity of the region.
Ahead of his Tokyo touchdown, hundreds of people had gathered in central Tokyo a day before to protest his 3-day visit to Japan, saying the visit could disrupt peace in the Asia-Pacific region.
Their actions are extremely dangerous now. Japan and the U.S. are trying to conduct a war of aggression on China.
Also in Japan, President Joe Biden launched his plan for U.S. economic engagement in Asia, leaving it to the 13 founding countries to work out how to enforce their agreement and if China could overjoin.
The future of the 21st century economy is going to be largely written in Indo-Pacific, in our region. The Indo-Pacific covers half the population of the world and more than 60% of the global GDP. And the nations represented here today, and those who will join this framework in the future, are signing up to work toward an economic vision that will deliver for all peoples, all our people.
The Indo-Pacific Economic Framework for Prosperity deal offers no tariff relief to the countries that join, including India, Malaysia, and the Philippines, but provides a way to sort through key issues from climate change to supply chain resilience and digital trade.
More than 100 million people all over the world have been driven from their homes as a result of violence, conflict, persecution, and human rights violations. The UN Refugee Agency, UNHCR, made this known recently, citing a new report. The figure combines refugees, asylum seekers, and nearly 60 million people displaced inside their own countries.
More than 100 million people have been driven from their homes across the globe, a situation caused by violence, persecution, or protracted conflict in countries. That's according to the UN Refugee Agency, UNHCR. New data from the UNHCR shows that the number of forcibly displaced people worldwide rose towards 90 million by the end of 2021. Filippo Grandi, the United Nations High Commissioner for Refugees, describes the figures as stark, alarming and sobering, and says it is a record that should never have been set.
I came here to emphasize once more, like I did in Afghanistan, like I did in Cameroon recently, that much as we're all focusing on Ukraine as a catastrophic emergency, we must not forget that there's other critical situations in the world that need attention and resources.
The Russia-Ukraine conflict has displaced 8 million within the territory of Ukraine this year, while more than 6 million refugee movements from the country have been registered so far. The displacement is propelled by new waves of violence or protracted conflict in countries including Ethiopia, Burkina Faso, Myanmar, Nigeria, Afghanistan, and the Democratic Republic of Congo. At over 1% of the global population, the overall figure is equivalent to the 14th most populous country in the world. UNHCR will release its annual Global Trends report on June the 16th, outlining a full set of global, regional and national data on forced displacement for 2021, as well as more limited updates to April 2022 and details on returns and solutions.
When Foreign Dispatches returns in just a moment, the world's shortest teenage male is awarded a Guinness World Record in Nepal. Please stay with us. Welcome back to the program. The 5th Global Conference on the Elimination of Child Labour has ended with the Durban Call to Action document, which prescribes priorities to end the problem and all the social complications associated with it. The event, put together by the International Labour Organization and UNICEF, had government, labour, civil societies, as well as some Nobel Peace Laureates in attendance in South Africa. The theme was Raise Your Hand for Kids, and for the first time, children were active participants.
After 5 days of speeches, panel discussions and appeals, the 5th Global Conference on the Elimination of Child Labour ended with the Durban Call to Action document. The main points include ending child labour in agriculture, realise children's right to education and equitable compulsory access to it, increase financing and international cooperation for the fight, accelerate multi-stakeholder effort to prevent and eliminate child labour, achieve universal access to social protection, strengthen the prevention of child labour, as well as protection of survivors. Ghana is one of the many countries grappling with the child labour issues, especially in agriculture, and the government says measures are being taken to end it.
So now education from primary, that is the basic, to senior high school is free. And government is also doing another intervention in the area of TVET, that is technical and vocational education, where we're trying to incorporate it into the free education system. There is free feeding and then provision of uniform and other school supplies to all schools to ensure that children do stay in school and they do not work on the fields.
The issue of the number of children who are not going to school, especially girls, are linked. And one of the linkage is the economic and the financial drivers that push family to take their children out of school and get them to work. So we have to address, the first thing is to address these financial drivers that make families make such an unfortunate choice, school or work.
For the first time, children were part of the conference and not just for singing and dancing. There was a special intergeneration session where they got a chance to read out their own call to action, and they're happy for the opportunity.
It is very, very pertinent that children are actually included because, as it has been constantly said, you can never say anything about children without children themselves. It's better to hear it from the horse's mouth, because now if you start thinking for children, you are assuming, and assumptions are very, very wrong. And that's why we actually get to a point whereby we're missing the point.
As long as we are going to say we must stop child labor, social protection mechanisms must be put first. They must know how I'm going to get my education, how am I going to get my basic needs, as long as how my life is going to continue after I stop working.
I feel happy that the children are involved in this conference because a lot of them panics and they have a lot of suffering, so they try maybe to find the solution. So the conference maybe can help to change the situation.
According to the 2020 global estimates of child labor, 160 million boys and girls remain in child labor, and 112 million are in agriculture. Others are child combatants, among other jobs. From 2016 to 2020, child labor is said to have increased by 8.9 million, entirely among 5 to 11-year-olds. The UN set deadline to end child labor is 2025. Hopefully, things will change for the better in 3 years.
The effects of climate change continues to be felt around the world, with many countries reporting record heavy rains, bringing along flood and destruction to lives and properties. We begin in India, where many have been suffering a sweltering heat wave. However, the rains brought some respite, but devastating floods.
In India's northeastern Assam state, floods caused by pre-monsoon rains killed at least 18 people and displaced more than 800,000 from their homes. The swollen rivers have wreaked havoc, submerging houses, a fairground, and destroying crops in 31 districts of the state. Residents have resorted to living in tents as water inundates their houses. Hundreds of thousands have fled to higher grounds after pre-monsoon rains caused the river Brahmaputra and its tributaries to swell.
So amongst that, only 2 camps are inundated and get submerged with water, and rest all are now having adequate access from outside, and so that's why we are right now we are having no such problem from flood.
Over 500 people in the Nelly area of Morigaon district have taken shelter on roadsides in temporary tents and huts. Drinking water is scarce and people are running out of food.
There is the issue of clean drinking water in our area. The village head came and inquired about the issue, but we have not received any relief. Drinking water is scarce, which is an issue. We need boats to reach our homes.
Over in Indonesia, a tidal flood forced thousands to evacuate in the Indonesian city of Semarang, with authorities warning that floodwaters could continue to rise. High waves breached the seawall of the city in central Java City, causing floodwaters to reach 2.1 meters. That's among the highest levels seen in the area in decades. Indonesia, one of the most disaster-prone nations on earth, frequently suffers from floods and landslides, particularly during the rainy season from November to March. These Brazilians in the Amazonas state have lost their livelihoods as floods washed away the crops of entire villages, and their livestock also are now underwater. Farmers in the municipality of Carreiro da Várzea, which is located by the Amazon River, are worried because their village's economy relies on agriculture and cattle breeding.
We've been having these floods now constantly. Last year, I planted and lost. This year, I planted and lost it again because the floods are big and we need the land to work on.
Aí a gente fica sem atividade nenhuma aqui. Nós não temos atividade nenhuma.
Back in Africa, residents of Ghana's capital, Accra, woke up to the sound of heavy rains on Tuesday, which caused flash flooding throughout the city and displaced some residents.
We started packing our things from 12:30 there and went back to sleep. So I think around 2 the rain was too much. It started entering our rooms, so we have to run for our lives here. So we all ran to the top there. So when we came back, I think 4 then, our rooms, everything was scattered, everything.
Seasonal rains in West Africa, which tend to start in June and lasts until October, often cause deadly floods in urban areas.
We end the program in Nepal. Let's go meet a Nepali teenager who measures 73 centimeters and is the world's shortest person. Dor Bahadur Kapangi, who was born in November 2004, has received the Guinness World Record certificate in Kathmandu for the world's shortest living male teenager.
Home to Mount Everest, the world's tallest mountain, Nepal also boasts of having the planet's shortest living male teenager. Dor Bahadur Kapangi has been proclaimed the world's shortest living male teenager and received the Guinness World Records holder certificate. At a simple function in Kathmandu, the Nepal Tourism Board chief Danajay Regmi presented the certificate to Dor, his brother right by his side.
I feel sorry for my brother as he could not grow well. At the same time, I am happy that he has received a world record certificate.
Dor Kapangi, who measured 73.43 centimeters in March this year, was born on the 14th of November 2004 and studies in grade 1 in his village.
I hope my brother gets support for his education.
In 2010, Khagendra Thapa Maga, also from Nepal, was declared the shortest teen at 67.08 centimeters. However, Maga died 2 years ago.
And that's it on Foreign Dispatches for today. Thank you so much for watching. I'm Layo Olarinde.